For the last week, I've started creating a new experience. And while I've generally had a pretty good time, there are definitely times I want to give up developing on UEFN altogether and just start a new project in Unreal Engine 5. Now, before I get into it, if you think there's a better way I'm doing something, or if you think I'm doing something wrong, or you just disagree with me, leave a comment below because I would actually really love to hear your opinions and know what your experience has been with UEFN, especially if you're a beginner. Number one, push changes. I don't know about any of you, but when I'm developing in UEFN, the last thing I want to see is that dreaded yellow icon that says push changes. Add a new device, push changes. Update a widget, push changes. Make a tiny verse code update, push changes. Okay, pushing some code by itself isn't that bad, but still, push changes. So many actions require you to push changes. If you want to simply try something out, and if you don't know what you are doing and just experimenting, wow, the time to launch a session and push a change can really add up. Sure, I could try and manage my time and work on something else, but why should I have to? I can't think of any other engine that does this. I mean, hell, even Roblox does this way better. So, this step is pretty easy for Epic. Just give us an offline runtime and let us publish only when needed. Yeah, I know, not asking for too much. Number two, verse. So let me just preface this with that verse is a very new language. It's still under development and hasn't been around for that long. Maybe a year and a half, maybe a bit longer. I'm not too sure. Um, and compare that to other languages like C Sharp, Lua, Python, all those other languages. They've been around for decades, so they've had a lot longer to, you know, um, really refine the experience. However, in saying that, Epic have said multiple times that Verse is an easy language to grasp, and while that might be true compared to like C++, for example, it's not beginner friendly, at least in my opinion. And I've had multiple people tell me that it's hard and they're struggling with it. Some of these have been brand new people to programming, and some people have been doing it for a little while. And it's pretty easy to see why it can be confusing. So I'm just going to go through a few examples here and come up with them a suggestion of how they can make this better.
And just quickly before we get started, I'd just like to say that from a background, my dominant language is C# and JavaScript, so that probably has an influence of the way I like to program. Okay, so let's take a look here, and let's begin at a local function on begins. For example, I believe consistency is key, especially when defining things. So here, let's do a constant for an integer. So my int, and then we'll get colon equals 1. This is accepted, no problems. In most other languages, especially the easier ones, if you wanted to change this into a variable, you would say var. In fact, in most other languages, variable is the default and constants needs to be defined. This doesn't like this because it's expecting a type. So if we were to put in our cursor here and say int, okay, it's got it. It now says this is a variable of type int, but that's confusing because in one section you need to define a type and in the other you don't. Now this also gets a little bit more confusing because if I were to get rid of this variable and have another constant, that also works. So even at a local level, you can have a type defined or not defined. Okay, that's a bit more flexibility, but it makes it confusing in comparison to variables. Now, the other thing which even gets more confusing is that this is fine in a local function, but if I were to use this at the class level, it doesn't like it because now it is saying, let's have a type, which it does like. And the consistency is just not there. If I can define it without a type in the local function, I should also be able to do that in the class level. So make it consistent to make it more understandable and more user-friendly. If it requires a type, fine. Most languages require a type. use that across the whole board. Okay, so one other thing that's just quite frustrating is the availability of functions that you were probably to expect in other languages. For example, I've got this variable defined here as agent array. Now, if you wanted to see what members it contained, it doesn't really show you in the autocomplete or in the IntelliSense. It's just not there. So if we let that complete, there's no length here. You would have to go to the documentation to figure out it was there, or just assumed it was there, and then hope it didn't give you give you an error. Here it says length under the autocomplete. If you did that, it's actually going to break, so it's quite confusing. But beyond that, like for example, an array doesn't have any sort functions or contains anything like that. So yeah, these things are quite useful when you're trying to figure something out, develop, and ultimately do something. And this sort of extends to the functions within devices. So one of the things I was trying to do was change the speed of a modular view movement. Okay, so I had this device and I wanted to update the speed for this, but there isn't any sort of function that allows me to do that. So you do have to do a bit of a workaround in terms of changing that. I didn't actually end up trying to go any further than that, but I'd imagine you could get another instance of this device and activate it onto another pawn or whoever you wanted to do it. And these are the sorts of things which really hold you back, and it's quite frustrating and makes it a bit of a struggle. Okay, so here I've just got a random project open that I've been working on in Unreal Engine, and I just kind of want to show some differences between blueprints and verse, and why I think ultimately for UEFN they should make a ported version or a branched version of blueprints and bring that over to UEFN and either make an addition to verse or just replace verse altogether, because it's a lot easier, it's a lot more intuitive, and then when you think about that, a lot of the people who are creating these experiences, they've come from the Fortnite ecosystem. They've probably made a fair bit in creative. The next logical step for them is to go into UEFN. Learning a whole new language or learning programming altogether is a difficult task. Then they can have a bit of an easier onboarding with Blueprints, a visual scripting tool. And let me just give you an example like of what I did before in Verse. So if you wanted to make a variable, you simply click this button, and my int array, for example, which is what I had before, if I can spell, and you've created your variable. Then up here you've got your variable type. I've already got it on the array type because this is the 7th time I've tried to record this, and you can have a look here. You can have singles, you can have sets and maps as well. So it's really easy to select the type you wanted. So I'll put this on array, and then if we compile, you can then add your, if you wanted some default elements, you can add that in, or you can set that through runtime. So once you've done that, you simply just click and drag that over. You say get my integer array, and then one of the examples I had before was that the functions weren't available. So if I stand here, look here, and say like sort, a sort is right there. I can sort the integer array. If I wanted to do a contains, like typing in contains, the IntelliSense here is really helpful. And what's even more helpful is this context sensitive checkbox. It effectively says only show items which is relevant to what I'm dragging from, in this case the integer array. So I can do that. And one thing that I didn't touch on when we were looking at the verse code was simple things like add. So you've got add here, and you can add an element. You can't do that through native functions within verse. You have to manually do it. It's not that hard, but you have to reset your array, because by definition an array is immutable. You can't change the array itself, but you can reset it or remake it with the new elements. But this sort of just handles that for you. And then, just one more example. I don't know, shuffle. Yeah, and the shuffle would then, just randomly shuffle the array into a different order. And you have all these functions here that otherwise in Verse you would have to do manually. And if you're new at programming, even if you're not, even if you've been doing programming for a while, it's a pain to figure out how to do that. It's a pain to work out when so often these things are already done for you. And ultimately, what I think is this can really help, the Fortnite system grow, because you have effectively, you'll just make it easier to make more content, and more content would be better for Epic as long as it's the right content.
Number 3, access to content. When developing a level, Epic supply a huge amount of content, and it's all really high quality. I love the style, and I really like using it. But there's a problem. When you want to modify something to make it fit a little bit better with your scene, your game, well, most of it you simply can't. For example, in the first game I made, I wanted to change the color for half of this wall. But as you can see, I could only get the reference and have no access to the texture. I mean, it would be good if I could at least make a copy of it so I could edit it and take that texture data and slightly modify it in, say, Photoshop, for example, re-import it, and I have a slightly different version. So my suggestion for this is pretty simple. Give us a bit more access to the materials, to the props, to the meshes, to everything that's already existing in the content. And number 4, no more workarounds. So while I've been browsing on YouTube, finding videos to learn about UEFN, I found this video from How To Boss. If you're interested in learning UEFN, go check his channel out. He does have some pretty good tutorials. He had one though on creating a custom in-game animation. And then after watching it, I was a bit dumbfounded. I said, this can't be real. This can't be the way you have to make animations in-game. And to give you the short of it, basically you need to copy the chair device. Out of all devices, the chair device. Export the XML and hack in a dodgy workaround to make this work. And quite honestly, as I watch more and more how-to videos and learning materials, this seems like common practice within UEFN. A lot of workarounds to get something to work. So for this suggestion, we need proper features. Number 5, custom weapons and items. Now this kind of relates to the last point, and it's pretty simple. Give us a fully fledged, feature-rich way of adding and modifying weapons and new items. Now, I do believe that at least one of these, for the item part, that is, it's on the roadmap, and it should be released Q1 of this year. But from what I can see is that this feature itself has been delayed multiple times already. So what we really need is this to come out. And that's it. That's 5 points I'd like to make about how UEFN could be better. If you agree, disagree, like I said, leave comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. And I hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time.